Welcome back to another episode. I have my brother here again. It's getting harder and harder to find people, so I'm gonna have to hit up my buddies or start inviting other people to the podcast. Hopefully, my uncle and aunts are interested. If not, it's gonna be tough. This is gonna be you, Benny, Joseph, same people over. I mean, which is fine, but
Yeah.
I'm curious to just hear more stories. But
Uh-huh.
appreciate you coming through last
Of
minute.
course. Of course.
Um, yeah, last week I was talking to Benny and just really scratching the surface of how childhood and trauma and love all pretty much tied together. And I figured since we had pretty similar childhoods, or
Yeah.
the same one, or I don't know if it's the same, but similar, we can dive into that.
What was one of the bigger topics you guys talked about? I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. Y'all talked for a long time there.
We did. What did we? It was. I think a big one is a lot of what I look for in a romantic relationship stems from either what I didn't have growing up, or also there are triggers in romantic relationships that also stems from my childhood. It's complicated, right? Like
Yeah.
there's so much I can't really think of an example off the top of my head, but maybe if you talk, I'll flow and
Yeah,
get some
yeah. So
ideas.
yeah, I mean, biggest thing I could think about is like as a kid, like locking the computer room when we're on summers. Like, why did you have to do that? It's like our summer break, like no reasoning, no explanation, just lock the door. Hey, we found a way, climbed through the window and
I know,
everything,
that was
but
crazy.
couldn't stop us.
Do you think she knew?
I don't think she knew, but Dad knew. Computers were born when he came home, so he gotta know. He's not that.
Yeah.
But I think that yes, that's like the stopping us and not really telling us the reason. But I think that comes down to communication. It's like open dialogue, and that kind of like portrays in relationships for me now as well. So it's like being open to talk about certain things when we're not comfortable, like when like grandma was sick or like when third uncle in Hong Kong was sick. Like I didn't know how to express those feelings and just talk to just Morgan about that, right? It's just that wall that we built up as a kid. Like we're always like, mom would always tell me, oh, don't go around telling people this. Like she still to this day tells me that, and
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that
yeah.
line just like is so strictly spoken to me. And it was just to the point where that's just so drilled in my head. It's like, oh, don't go around telling people anything because family secrets, family trades. But the reason behind that, I never found out. So I think the communication end of things is the toughest part. Just knowing that it's okay to talk to your partner about all sorts of things. There's like nothing to hide, and there's no need to hide anything. It's that open dialogue and having that communication with your parents and being comfortable with telling them like the struggles and like all the sorts of things. Like when I was going through school, like there's a lot of pressure, right? Like, but I never once talked to them about that type of pressure and like just sucked it all and just sucked through it. So, I mean, there's like that biggest part is like there should be your biggest support system. Not saying that they haven't supported us in
No,
different
no,
ways,
yeah.
but
I
communication
yeah, I said
support
this
is completely like non-existent pretty much.
yeah, I said that to Benny. I said it's not like they don't care and love us, but it's just not in ways that we need. And I think I find a lot of that in my relationships. They're ways to show love that I like, and so when it's not that, it's hard, it's exhausting because then I think it just again triggers and reminds me of how hard my childhood was. And grandma was just a great example. It was just we didn't talk much. We like, especially as she got older, we really didn't like. She started losing her memory. We like didn't communicate as much, but it was the quality time. It was the happiness that she appreciated and showed when I just showed up. So not just like quality time, but also just showing up. I think that's a huge part of who I am. Not only romantically, but I think socially with friends, professionally with my students and my colleagues. I That's so important to me, and a big part of showing love is showing up. And I think that also just stems back to childhood, right? Like, dad was there for swim meets, games, and whatnot, but you know, mom wasn't, and that for me, I've internalized that because that's how I felt as a kid, not like seeing my support system there and that
Mm-hmm.
how much that hurt. And so now I just try to show up because even if I don't say
Mm-hmm.
words of affirmation,
Mm-hmm.
even if I there's what is it, physical touch or gifts and
Mm-hmm.
acts of service. Well, I think acts of service might count as showing up. I don't know,
Yeah.
but yeah, so much of the love languages for me include just being there
Mm-hmm.
because growing up, that's how it was for me.
Mm-hmm.
But those walls, speaking of like building that up, I think for me, it's seeing how far you're willing, or the part like in our relationship, how far you're like willing to break these walls down,
Mm-hmm.
because there's just so many things I've experienced where I just see if we can't even get past this together, right? It's kind of impossible to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I haven't found the right person. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. It's tough. How
Yeah.
did you
I think
navigate
for
that?
me, the biggest thing that came up to was just like communication and just expressive emotions, which too, like, I was never great at. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it was childhood, maybe it was just the way I just became, but I mean, obviously, everything kind of stems from childhood generally. So I think the communication part and the emotion part was just not there in the beginning, and I never really found the importance of it, right? Like, all my other past relationships was just like I was who I was, like the dull, not really showing emotion type person. But when Morgan started kind of expressing the need to like, oh, this stuff is important. Like, you should try it out. Like, it'll help better understand each other. Like, in the very beginning, it was tough, right? It's like sudden change of like what I'm so used to. But after a while, like, that no longer just translates in our relationship, like Morgan's and I relationship. But I started noticing like, oh, I started talking to mom and dad more about like what they're doing, like how their health is doing or what so, and like
Mm,
that also translates to patient care. Like, oh, I started talking to more patients about their family. Oh, how's your weekend? But not just like, oh, what'd you do for fun? Like, if they tell me something bad happened, like
mm-hmm.
I'll dig deeper with them.
Yeah.
So I didn't see it just like between like hers and I's relationship, but it's more so of like what that brought out from me as a person in all my different roles as a son, as a doctor, as a boyfriend. So I think just understanding why someone's asking for a specific change and is that something good or bad, because someone might ask you to change and this might be changing for the bad, but that change could also be good. And I think for
Mm-hmm.
me, when that topic was brought up, I was like, oh, I can see the positive changes in this. Like, there's no harm in being more communicative, being more emotionally there for somebody. So I was like, oh, I'll give it a try. Like, but I obviously still have my shortcomings. Sometimes I just don't communicate. Sometimes I just don't show certain emotions just because, I mean, I've been like that for
Mm-hmm.
20 plus years. So there are times where it's hard, but you also start understanding, oh, this is important, not just for you, but the person that you're trying to build a life with. So I think that was kind of the start of the stem of like all these kind of changes in at least my personalities or the way you're talking about like breaking down the walls. I think emotion was a wall,
Mm-hmm.
communication's a wall. I'm sure I have other walls as well, but those were kind of the big two that was like, okay, these got to go first.
My biggest wall is probably words of affirmation. And I like said this last week. The affectionate type isn't the type I go for, and that's because it's just words of affirmation. If you, what's that like?
It's tough. That's one that I just can't wrap my head around because that's so one on one. Like that's to your. I mean, you could say it to like your parents as well, but yeah, that's never gonna happen with us. But for Morgan and I, like the words of affirmation, like she loves it. Like she like constantly wants it and stuff like that. And like right from the get go, I was like, I don't think I could give to that certain degree, and I think that's the
Mm,
part where she had to change for me,
mm.
to adapt for the changes for what I can and cannot handle. And for words of affirmation, that's just something that like I literally grew up with none,
Zero,
zero.
zero.
So like that was just like super hard. Like I'm starting to get a little bit better about it. Like I would say like I missed you or like stuff like that. But like to the certain point, it was like saying like those three words. Like it's still a little bit tough for me. And the way I kind of explained it to her was like not that I'm like don't love her, right? Like I say I love her, but just like those three specific words. She's like, why can't you just put the I in front of it? You're saying the last two words already, but I'm like,
Mm,
it's just different.
mm,
And I kind of explained it to her. I was like, oh, like I want to say it to you when I like know, like I want to put a ring on the finger, like that day or maybe like that moment, whatever that case is. But like that, just putting that I in front of it, just like makes it feel so different. I think because I lacked so much of it growing up, saying that to somebody else is that means like you've broken down my like last single law,
mm,
and I'm like I'm pretty much ready to go. So that to me was my way of saying like you're just gonna have to work with me for words of affirmation, just because like that's the final straw for me. Like I could change a lot of different stuff, the way I communicate, the way I express, the way I kind of like show. Originally my way of showing love was like acts of service, like when she was in school still and I was out like cleaning her room, vacuuming, stuff like that, so she could have one less thing to stress about. But those words are just like hard for me to say. And I think, I mean, we understood that. Like, we've been going well without needing to say it. But,
yeah.
and I think she knows that I do.
No,
So I think that's
obviously,
the
yeah.
biggest thing is like, as long as your partner still knows that you do love them or that you do care for them quite a bit, I think that's good enough until like that really needs to become more prominent with the words of affirmation. But yeah, it's tough. It's still tough.
No, 100%.
It's ongoing thing.
In my relationship, I'm really just looking for quality time because acts of service, like cleaning, you mentioned just helping her clean and whatnot, and that's great. Like I would appreciate that, but if then that like comes up in whatever, say an argument or we're just having discussion, I think my response would be I appreciate it, right? But also that's not what I need. So when you mentioned acts of service, I was like, oh wait, maybe acts of service isn't my love language either. I would definitely appreciate it, but what I really need is just knowing when to be there for me, but also at the same time knowing how to give me that space when I need it because I do think I'm really independent. And even in a romantic relationship, I want to have like time to myself, which is why I think I said like the affectionate type is generally not my type because the way they need love and care is just the opposite of me, and it's exhausting sometimes to have to give that, especially as an educator, as a teacher, when I'm already doing that from 8 to 4,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But maybe things might change when I'm not in the classroom or when I'm not an educator. But as of right now, I have to put so much energy into my professional life that when I come home, I want to relax. I want to be able to just chill and not talk. Yeah, going to the gym, right? I can just spend hour and a half to just by myself doing my own thing because that's how I'm recovering. And so I think my future partner needs to understand that. That's how at least if I'm still teaching, right? Or in the classroom, if I have a stressful job where I am giving so much of my energy, it's just I need that time to myself and to just be ready to give you more when the time comes, like maybe later in the evening or when we're eating dinner or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the biggest part is just finding the person that fits you, but it doesn't have to be the to the T is what I've kind of like noticed, like that criteria. Like I'm sure the perfect person's out there somewhere, but like chance of you meeting them is like pretty slim. But I think the
Oh
biggest
no.
part for
Oh
I
no.
think the biggest part for me was like the willingness to change, to adapt to each other's needs. And I think that's more important than finding someone that's already like that, just because like
Mm.
that means they'll also be probably sharing the same level of childhood trauma or stuff like that. And like, would that be healthy for a family? I mean, I'm just throwing things out there, like
Mm-hmm.
not saying that not gonna have a happy or like nurturing family, but just similar traumas like makes you sometimes neglect certain other parts of the kind of the relationship, right? So like you don't fond of words of affirmations or stuff like that, maybe that would translate to when you have kids or something like that, or the way you express your emotions to your coworkers, to your kids, stuff like that. So if you have someone similar, you might never find that as, I'm not saying it's a shortcoming, I'm not saying that at
Mm-hmm.
all, but just that aspect of that touch of your character, your personality might never be shown because you're also someone that is like that as well. So I think for me, it wasn't like finding like, oh, this is my criteria, this is exactly what I need, but finding that one person that is like willing to change with you when you both have issues, not issues, but like kind of your quirks that are a little bit different and willing to find that middle ground, be like, oh, you're at this end, I'm at this end, let's find somewhere in the middle. Obviously, it's tough in the beginning, but I mean, if that person's the person, like you'll be willing to do those small things. And again, it's not telling you to change your entire personality or character, but like for me, it was like, oh, what harm does it do to me showing a little bit more emotion to the people around me?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, every relationship has the issues, like its ups and downs. But I think for me, the biggest part going into the future, I always look for is like, what are we doing to plan for the future? And if you're able to plan the future with somebody, those shortcomings sometimes you just forget it about. You forget about it as well. Because it's like if you're willing to plan a future with somebody, that dirty dish in the sink isn't gonna kill the relationship, right? But like sometimes like some people are just so freaky and like needing to do control X, Y, and Z things might be an issue. And like
Uh-huh.
if that's triggering to you, then that person you're with is probably not your future partner. And I
Oh,
think for me that's how I kind of determined it. I was like, oh, I have my shortcomings, my partner has my shortcoming or her shortcomings, and it's like, well, I can ignore it. It's not that big of a deal. So that's also when I started noticing, oh, the small things that used to would trigger me, and just now I'm just like, that could wait.
oh no. Yes, I think for me, those walls are definitely meant to be broken down
Mm-hmm.
together, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Step by step. And I have relationships where it's like that. But I think the successful ones, it's the piece that where like our future isn't matched up. So that's always a bummer. But then, like I think you just said, all the other relationships I've had, there were just a lot of those triggers slash red flags that it was just too hard to get through.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, right, like what you said about the end goal for me, the future. I don't even know what that looks like anymore. I had the interview, right, and I applied. Definitely still a bit anxious and nervous that I might not get Fulbright Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm qualified, and I was pretty stressed about it this week. But yesterday and Thursday at Block, I had seniors come in for a panel. That mentorship piece I was talking
Mm-hmm.
about. Juniors say like, "Oh, why are you leaving? Like, you should just stay for another year." I think that also reminded me of my childhood because I just felt that like to the core.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously I'm a teacher, but just hearing that and helping me realize, oh wait, if I don't get Fulbright Taiwan, it's okay. Like it's not meant to be. The universe had other plans, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe my plan is to make sure these juniors, I end up with these juniors, right? So I don't know, to go back to like why I started this
Mm-hmm.
conversation, or like this part of the conversation is I don't know what the future holds. So I don't even, so when I'm looking for a partner, well, I'm not looking for anyone right now, but um, I think that's hard for me. the future. I don't know. Like you, there's it's crystal. I think it's pretty clear for you, right? Like
Yeah.
you're both chiropractors. You're both building a practice now, and you have talked about where you want to settle. But I think for me, I don't have any of that.
I mean, I
I
think
don't know.
it's also okay. I think it's
No,
like
no, definitely. But it's scary. But yeah, it's okay. And I'm just kind of allowed, or I will allow everything to just run its course. But I'm just so glad I've had this time to reflect on all of this. And as sad as I was the past, or from like August to November, December, as sad as I was, I really appreciate that time to reflect and grow because I feel like I have, just in those 4 months, matured and realized these are my triggers. Let me communicate that up front and just be as honest as possible. And I feel good. I feel good. I feel like I'm in a place where when the right person does come, we'll break down those walls together,
yeah.
and then it'll be good.
I think
It'll
it's
be
the
good.
clarity part of it, right? Like these past couple of months, just like us talking more, talking to dad and mom more. I think it just gave a clarity of like why a lot of things were how they were, like why we grew up a certain way. I think for us, at least for me, just like going through that process and like knowing that crystal clear future. I mean, that's also scary in its own, but it's like, oh, what do I want to make sure that if I do have kids one day, like, what am I gonna do for my kids? Who am I gonna be? Like, taking the good and bad of everything. And I think that's also tough because, like, again, I don't know. I'm not saying that our parents never showed their care or love, but
They have.
it's
They
also at
have.
the same time like, what if a certain kid likes the way they treated them? Like, we're always picking sides, right? It's like, oh, we didn't get this, so we want this. So it's like, oh, if you give a lot of words, I mean, maybe there's people out there that doesn't like words of affirmation because they got a lot as a kid. Like, who knows? But I think for me, it's just like going through just talking more now and just like being more open about certain things. Mom and dad was like, oh yeah, we could change. We give you more words of affirmation. Come over here. I could give you a hug. I'm like, no, too late. That's
Oh
a
yeah.
little past the time.
Yeah. Nah, I'm good. That's what I don't want that now.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just been interesting to kind of talk about that certain stuff, and I mean, not that it's never too late. It's like
No,
better to understand. Like,
for
don't
sure.
bring anything negative out. But
For sure.
that's nice. It's nice to see that communication is just all around increased.
Yeah. Well,
And
I've been really lucky because I teach
mhm.
and I've had a lot of practice. I don't think communication is something.
Communicating with your feelings, not just communication. Like, I think that's different. Like communicating in not a professional way,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
more a
yeah, yeah, for sure.
sympathy way and like connection way is so different for.
Yeah,
Which I mean, I'm not saying that you don't get that with your
no, no, for
students,
sure.
but yeah.
I don't know if I communicate. No, actually, I don't communicate my emotions. My students have told me that. But what I will say is I do communicate enough where I think for me, it's also that like
Professional.
professional line, right? But there are like just so many examples. Just hearing the seniors talk to the juniors yesterday, I like felt really emotional because for the past 2 years we've worked together. Started with not knowing much about college and career, and now like seeing them move on and get ready to finish high school, but also throughout all that time, the hard work, the rejection, and for some of the seniors, they're still going through that. But communicating, I'm proud of you, navigating emotions, and like for me, it's hard for me to understand the emotional piece because again, I don't have that. But just giving them the space to let the emotions out. I think I've gotten really good at awkwardly sitting there or standing there and just letting them go through it, talk me through it. And I think that's super important where you talk about the future. And I've always thought about like having kids. I've always wanted them. So I feel pretty good about that too.
Yeah. Future is exciting,
It is.
even
It
if it's
is.
unclear.
It's so unclear. Even like sitting here right now, I thought, oh, I'll be abroad next year. I'll be in Taiwan. And
Mm-hmm.
so I had the interview, didn't feel all that confident, felt anxious, and I started looking at programs like private schools and
Mm-hmm.
cram schools and whatnot. But I was like, wait, like let me just take a step back and see where life takes me, because if Taiwan isn't the place, it isn't the place. And
Mm-hmm.
even if I force myself to like teach at cram school, I'm just gonna be really unhappy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if I don't get it, maybe it is the universe saying, hey, finish out with these juniors.
Mm.
I would like love to go to Brazil, and I still do, but it didn't work out. And yeah, you're right. It is unclear, but it is exciting because I feel like I've grown a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm at a point where I'm really okay with who I am. But I think, well, I've always been okay with who I am, but I think I'm ready to grow and change if I need to. And
Mm-hmm.
we'll grow. Let's just say grow.
Yeah.
If we can grow together, then I'm ready to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming through.
Yeah. Love sharing this stuff just because it's something that we don't talk about a lot.
We
So.
don't. We don't. Hopefully. Oh, talking about talking. I with our parents. I was just thinking, like, if we needed family therapy, I'd be down. If that's
We'll
what we
see about
need, yeah.
that.
I don't know, like that. I think that's how ready I am. If they want,
Oh
if
wow.
yeah, if they want to, well, I'm not gonna pay for it, but if they wanted to do a family sesh with a therapist, I'd be like, I'd be curious to see what they say as well.
Hmm.
But
That could be
yeah,
for another day.
I know. Sweet. All right.
All right. See you guys.